Hi, welcome to the Love and Purity podcast. I'm going to be looking at the last portion in Genesis this week. And so we're going to be looking at the blessings that Jacob gives to his sons and highlighting some of the long-term effects of sin. And so, because Jacob is actually bringing up some of these faults that his sons had in this final blessing that he gives. But I want to open up with a quote. This is from Randy Alcorn. It's called The Purity Principle. He actually wrote a book. I recommend it if you can get your hands on it. But the purity principle is purity is always smart, impurity is always stupid. And so as we look at some of these examples of Jacob's sons, I want to just highlight how their lives illustrate this. Their lives illustrate this principle that purity is always smart and impurity is always stupid. Okay, let's look at Reuben. So Genesis 49, verse 3, Jacob opens up and says, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, in the beginning of my strength. Starts out really grand and amazing. But then verse 4, unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. So here we know, going back, Reuben has committed adultery with Bilhah. This is Jacob's concubine. And Jacob is remembering this for so many years later. He's looking back and going, Reuben, you're unstable as water. There's an instability that he sees in Reuben's life, and he says, because of this, you're not going to excel. We need to have groundedness. And, on the flip side, we need to have rooted, grounded. We don't need to be like Reuben, unstable as water. We need to be rooted and grounded, firm in our foundation. Going on to Simeon and Levi. These are this blessing, supposed blessing, right? He had some, I think, positive things to say about them, but here's some of the negative things that he remembers about Simeon and Levi. This is Genesis 49:5. It says, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place, for in their anger they slew a man. Cursed be their anger. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So here Jacob is referring to the instance in Shechem, right, where Dinah is raped by this guy in Shechem. And Simeon and Levi are just so upset by this. They're going in and they just wipe out the men in the town, right? And so Jacob was upset about this whole thing. Well, we can see that Simeon and Levi, they're very passionate guys. They're like, we're not just going to just watch this happen to our sister. We're going to actually take matters into our own hands and do something. So if we look back at their lives and we see the way that this whole passion, this fire that they have for justice plays out, Levi has actually a very good, he's able to direct this passion in a good way. Simeon, he's not. Let's look at Levi for a second. So in the instance of the golden calf, all the tribes of Israel have, they're worshiping this calf. They're having this crazy party at the bottom of Mount Sinai. Exodus 32:26, then Moses stood in the entrance of the camp and said, whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together to him. So Levi's gathered to Moses, and then Moses says, go out and slaughter the idolaters. And then there's 3,000, right, that are killed in this whole instance. So Levi, we see later on, he is, in his life, he's able to direct this passion for justice, this passion for righteousness in a good way. And I think Levi's is the example we want to follow. We want to, yes, be passionate people that are standing up for justice and able to direct this passion in a righteous way. Simeon, on the other hand, he's not directing his passions in a righteous way. We see Numbers 25:14. Now the name of the Israelite who was killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, the son of Salu, a leader of a father's house among the Simeonites. So here Simeon is a ringleader in this whole harlotry, this whole thing that happens with the Midianites right before they go into the promised land, right there in the plains, right there opposite the promised land. And so the Simeonites are ringleaders, and we actually look, it has a massive, devastating effect on the tribe of Simeon. They are, their tribe numbers dramatically drop. There's thousands of them that are killed. But Simeon here, he's allowing his passions to be directed in a sinful way. This passion, this zeal that he has, he's not directing it in a righteous way, and he's going into sexual immorality. And so, interestingly, both Reuben and Simeon, these guys that are, that we see in their lives that they're not keeping to a righteous path, they're not actually allotted a portion of land on the east side of the Jordan with the rest of the tribes, right? They're stay on the west side. They're over in the region of the Gilad Mountains over on the west side. So it's just an interesting thing. Yes, it's part of the promised land, but there's something significant there that they actually, there was something I believe that God wanted the children of Israel to cross the Jordan, right, to go possess the land of Canaan. But yet Reuben and Simeon, these men that we see here, were not walking in righteousness for a portion of their lives as a whole. With the tribe of Simeon, they're not given that piece of land on the east side of Jordan. I think there's a principle there that impurity, if we allow impurity to take a root in our lives, then we're not going to be able to enter into the fullness of what God's destiny, what God's promise is for our lives. So along this train of thought of, how can sexual immorality actually keep us from God's best? Let's look at David. So we know David commits adultery. I remember growing up, people would say, make excuses for sexual immorality. Say, well, King David, he's a man after God's heart, man after God's own heart. And yet, we see him committing adultery. And so in a way, kind of making an excuse for David's sin. I think in that, we have to also realize the consequences. David experienced some very severe consequences for his sin. Let's look at 2 Samuel 12:13. And Nathan said to David, the Lord also has put away your sin. So David has repented. Nathan comes and he tells him, the Lord has put away your sin. Your sin has been forgiven. You shall not die. However, because by this deed, you have given great occasion to the enemies of the Lord to blaspheme. So our sins can be forgiven. If you're out there and you have mistakes in your past, yes, God can forgive you just like he forgave David. It doesn't automatically mean that the consequences or the discipline of the Lord will not still be in your life. We know that God disciplines those he loves. I think a lot of what we see later on happening in David's life is it's a pretty severe discipline that David gets for this sin that he committed. So what are some of the things that David experienced? What are some of the disciplines? Well, number one, his child dies that he has with Bathsheba. That was a very grievous thing for him. His child dies, and then Amnon and Tamar. So David's son Amnon, he rapes his sister Tamar. This is just a few chapters after the situation with David and Bathsheba. And you could just look, you see the similarities. This is a generational curse, you could say. David, he was going to try to manipulate the circumstances to get what he wanted, to get Bathsheba. He had to kill his friend, had to lie, had to do all these horrible things. Amnon, you read the story of Amnon, same thing. He's going to manipulate the circumstances to get what he wants. And this is the selfish nature of the flesh, right? Manipulating things to get what we want. And we see Amnon, this is a generational curse, I would say, that he's not resisting this lust, and he's just giving in to whatever his flesh wants. And then the Amnon story actually plays into the Absalom story, which Absalom is taking David's concubines, right? Just like Nathan prophesied. He said, you did this in secret. You thought this was a secret sin, but yet your wife's going to be taken from you, and it's going to be in the sight of the son. And so sometimes the things that we think they're just secret, nobody knows, but yet God will discipline us in a way sometimes that is very public. And it should put the fear of the Lord in us to realize just how seriously God takes these kind of sins. And so, yes, David's forgiven, but he still experiences consequences. He still experiences a discipline in his life for these sins. And so may the fear of the Lord be in us, that we would not just say, oh, I can sin and just to get forgiven. No, this is a very a weighty thing for us to sin, to knowingly sin, and then God is a just God. He's not just going to wink over our sins. There can be a discipline, and sometimes a severe discipline. Let's look at Romans 4:5. But to him who does not work, but believes on him who justifies the ungodly. Just want to emphasize that's such a beautiful phrase there, that God justifies the ungodly. That we, in our sinfulness, in our brokenness, we can come to God and he can forgive, just like he did with David. And actually, Paul goes on to refer to David. He said, his faith is accounted for righteousness, just as David also describes the blessedness of the man to whom God imputes righteousness apart from works. And then he quotes a psalm of David. Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man to whom the Lord shall not impute sin. So God can do this for us. God can justify us even in our brokenness, our sinfulness. God can take us and make us as white as snow, purify us. That does not mean that we just treat sin in a willy-nilly, just, and not have the fear of the Lord. My encouragement to you is have the fear of the Lord. Realize that God is a just God, a holy God. And if you have mistakes in your past, yes, he can justify you in your ungodliness. He can justify and cleanse you of your ungodliness and cleanse you of the impurity of your past and make you clean. That is the truth. Yeshua, he died so that we could be made free. We could be made clean. But going forward, Yeshua, he told the woman caught in adultery, right? Go and sin no more. This is our call. We do not just go and easily enter into sin, right? We don't just go into sin without considering that this is a weighty thing. God requires he requires holiness. He longs for us to walk in purity for our own good, really, right? Going back to that principle I said, purity is always smart, impurity is always stupid. So may God strengthen you out there for your own good, for your own self-interest, really, and for the sake of your generations, to seek purity, to seek to live a holy life. May God bless you. This is Love and Purity, the Love and Purity podcast, where we're calling disciples to a lifestyle of love and purity in joyful expectation of the coming King. May you be found ready when he comes. May God bless you.